Boat fishing.
Oh, I need to get one of those reels. Those things. Do you mind if I have a little water too?
A fish that
Just so you can pop up over here.
I go to the gas period.
We're supposed to come to bird fishing.
All right.
When I tossed it up out, and I actually hit a fish as I hit the water.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the last meeting of the year for December 12th, 2023. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, we call the roll, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Kurtz.
Here.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Here. Excellent.
And Trustee
Oh,
Albrecht will be absent this evening.
Thank you, Clerk. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for anyone in the audience tonight that wishes to speak to something that is not on tonight's agenda. Do you have any signed up? All right, thank you. Anyone in the audience that wishes to speak that did not have a chance to sign up? Anyone online, Clerk?
No, Mayor.
Okay. After that, we'll move on to consent. Would trustees like any items removed from consent? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second. Mayor Pro Tem has moved. With that, okay, trustee Kurtz has seconded. Clerk, may roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Excellent. We can move on to our regular agenda tonight, and we'll start with a broadband update by our Economic Development Director, Walt Elish.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, trustees. Well, it's been a little bit of a long haul, long road. We started this process back in 2019, I believe it was. Just a quick update for those of you who may not be aware. Initially, when we received the direction from you all to explore the feasibility or possibility of bringing broadband fiber to every household in the town of Berthoud, we proceeded to go down that path, initially working with 3 other communities, coming together. That didn't work out. Next, we looked at partnering, going the public sector route, and looking at maybe partnering with Loveland Pulse and Larimer County. That could potentially work, but the cost to the town would be significant. So we wanted to look at another option. During that process, we were made aware of a third option, and that's what we presented to you 2 months ago. The P3 option, where we would partner with an equity partner who would provide most of the capital to run the infrastructure, operate the infrastructure, and have an open access network throughout all of Berthoud so that anyone, any provider that wanted to come in could come in. We did the RFQ just like we said. We kept to the time frame. We received 2 responses to the RFQ. However, and both were pretty thorough, but neither response really addressed the P3 option as we described it in the RFQ. And neither one had real experience with a P3 option. They were interested in exploring that with us, but we didn't want to be in that position. We were looking for somebody to come in with that experience who we could partner with and then work with them to expand and bring fiber to every household in Berthoud. However, not to say that all was lost during that process. One of the responders, Hilltop Broadband, and Eric is here this evening, provided a second option with his original response. And that second option is what intrigued Chris and I and our consultants, even more so than Eric's response to the original P3 option. In your packet is Hilltop's Eric's response, second response, where he is proposing, Hilltop is proposing, that they would come in and run fiber and broadband throughout the whole town at no cost to Berthoud. We would partner with Hilltop in a sense of providing access to our right-of-ways and maybe streamlining our permitting process. Eric may talk a little more about that. While at the same time, in your packet, in Eric's response, you'll notice, he is committing to certain pricing structure, providing service to Berthoud facilities as well as other facilities throughout the community. He has an equity partner that's gonna help him finance and fund this endeavor that he wants to do in Berthoud. And he's here in Berthoud. We all know Eric. We know Hilltop, they're here. I think him being able to secure that financing really intrigued Chris and I think for us made this even more attractive in terms of working with Hilltop and Eric to really bring broadband and fiber network every household in the community in 2 years that he's committing to at a reasonable cost, a reasonable price to all of our residents that's outlined in your proposal, his proposal to us. So Chris and I, in talking with our consultants after the presentations, we believe that this is in the best interest of Berthoud. Currently, we have the big three or big two. Comcast it has fiber in town. CenturyLink, Eric is in town already providing fiber, and others. We don't think it's economically feasible, viable for the town at this point in time to fund our own network to the tune of about $20 million, while also setting up a separate department to run, the IT infrastructure. We think we're fairly well served, but with Eric's commitment to bring all of this into our community at a reasonable cost, really committed to competing very well with the Loveland Pulses of the world, the Lumens of the world, Comcasts of the world. We think this is the way to go. We think this is the best option for the town of Berthoud at this point in time. And we think this addresses what you initially proposed or suggested to us or directed us to do, is to explore the feasibility of bringing fiber and broadband service to every household in the town of Berthoud. And I think this for us is the best way to go. Questions, comments?
So, does this mean that Comcast, CenturyLink, and Hilltop will all have their own lines? So we'll have multiple sets of lines in the ground?
I'll let Eric address that to some extent. Currently, as I understand it, Eric knows this much better than I, the providers, Comcast, Lumen, Hilltop, to some extent, they're already sharing infrastructure. They're already doing that. Not to the household probably, but where it's feasible and appropriate, they are sharing infrastructure.
Yeah, I understood to the house, to the line would be different, but that's kind of my initial
Yeah.
feeling from this, when we
Yeah.
started this 4 years
Yeah.
ago, was that we put in the infrastructure and then all those lines or that system be shared somehow.
Correct. That is, as Chris and I learned through this whole process, and I was learning as I was going along too, that not all providers may use the infrastructure that's in town. Some of them would want to still put their own infrastructure in town. That's just the nature, I think, of the industry. So we could have done that and assumed or hoped that the other providers, the Comcast, the Lumens, the Hilltops, the Rise, would just naturally, use the fiber that's in the ground already. That is not necessarily the case. Is my understanding.
Any questions? Eric, I'm always gonna butcher your last name.
That's fine.
If you'd like, if you have anything to add, like to come to the.
Sure, I
podium.
can answer some questions or kind of further clarify as far as shared infrastructure and how that works. There are certain aspects where we do share or use each other's infrastructure, but it's usually at what we call the middle mile level or the long haul level. that's generally where we're gonna share infrastructure. When you get down to the final mile or that kind of curb to house connection, or even the, you know, the neighborhood to house connection, that's where you don't necessarily see a shared infrastructure anymore. A lot of reasons behind that. A lot of it comes in just to the operational aspects of how you have to maintain and manage that network. And if you have several operators who are all trying to use that same system, one person has to be in charge, right? Well, Comcast doesn't necessarily wanna play that game. They've already got their lines in place. They don't wanna make it easy for another provider to come in and provide service alongside them. Same thing goes for CenturyLink. So when you look at that shared access model, or that shared kind of final mile, as we call it, it works well in communities that have a certain size and density, and if there's no other providers already in place. Say if Berthoud had, say, just DSL and no Comcast, then perhaps that open access model would be a viable model here. But it's very difficult from an operational and a financial perspective for all of the players involved to have that shared access model work well. So it really comes down to the operational aspects and the financial aspects of it.
For the record, you're with,
Sure,
The
yeah,
owner of-
Eric
yeah.
Plessy, I'm the president of Hilltop Broadband.
Thank you.
so.
I was gonna say Ray Paluski, so thank you. Questions, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I guess question one, with, you know, were this to move forward, are there any data caps currently that you guys have as a company? So once you hit a certain amount of volume, does that get pared down in speed or?
So we don't have any specific data caps. We have what we call a fair use policy. And what that means is you could use as much data as you want to, so long as it's not affecting other users on the network, right? So we provision a certain amount of speed for a certain, let's say, neighborhood or a block of services. And if that person is always just, I guess, slamming the connection is a simple way to put it, then it might affect services to other neighbors. It's not common. I would say that we've seen it maybe twice in 10 years of business, and it hasn't even been on our fiber optic system. It's been on a wireless system. So when it comes to the fiber optics, we don't see that being a problem at all. And we provision enough bandwidth for everybody to essentially take their full gigabit speeds or better if we provision that to them, if that's what they order at their house.
And this is a full fiber system that we're talking about in this proposal, not kind of
Correct.
tapping on any wireless on any side of that?
No, so it's full fiber. It would be fiber from our head end to the customer home or to the business location. It's fiber all the way.
Is there any, I guess, robustness? I know certain ISPs will have like 99 point some percentage uptime. Is there any of that you can speak to in terms of?
Yeah, so we
robustness?
design our system for a 99.9% uptime. What that means is on average per year, you might expect, I think it's 47 minutes of downtime, right? You know, don't quote me on the exact numbers, but it's a pretty small amount when you look at it. We do all of our maintenance off hours, so if we ever do maintenance on the system, that's between 1 AM and 6 AM unless there's some reason we have to do it during daylight hours. During that time, we'll, you know, obviously make preparations to make it as efficient as possible and notify customers ahead of time, but it's pretty rare to do that.
In terms of reaching out to getting the full content of the Berthoud community, so even people that are kind of unincorporated Larimer, but part of Berthoud, is that also part of this plan for you as well?
It definitely is. So we've already served a lot of the areas west of town, and that's gonna continue for us. So we're not concentrating just in town. It's the region as a whole. So as best we can expand our footprint as we're working through things. Obviously, you know, the neighborhood out by the freeway by Love's out there is part of Berthoud, so we'll be extending our lines out there. And so if there's opportunity for us to serve some of those more rural farm locations out there, we're gonna do that as well. And the same thing on the west side of town, we're gonna continue to expand that network.
I guess the last question I have in terms of customer service or operationality, is that gonna be housed here or is that gonna be offsite?
So it's housed here in Berthoud. That's where our office is, and we'll continue to maintain that same operational principles that we have.
Oh, yeah.
Trustee Great.
Just had a question on the pricing structure, and I didn't see it in here, so apologize if I missed it, and it is, but is the pricing structure actually, I feel like is very competitive and attractive. Is there, I assume at some point it'll need to go up in cost, and I guess how
Sure.
would that work?
I think that's something to remain to be seen as we negotiate something with town staff as far as the uses of the rights of way and what kind of arrangements we're gonna make there. Obviously, there's market forces, competitive forces, inflationary forces we're gonna have to pay attention to as we go. But our idea is we're gonna closely model what Loveland Pulse does, or like Longmont Nextlight, or, you know, Fort Collins Connection, right? They can make it as an organization, making those things happen. We can do the similar things that they're doing as well. So we really wanna closely model that and just offer a competitive service here.
No other questions?
Anything else from the board? Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, this would be a question for staff, I guess. Should we move forward with this option? Is this something that we would entertain with an additional private corporation if another approached with similar terms?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to, and so if another entity was willing to meet the same kind of criteria that we established in some kind of right-of-way use agreement with Hilltop, we would consider the same, for another provider.
Okay.
Other questions? If you don't mind, I'd like to open it up to public just in case there's anyone else that wishes to speak. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak under the broadband update? Okay, having seen none, I'll close it. Administrator Kirk, this is just an update. Do you want any direction?
I think, from our perspective, we think this is probably the best path forward for us at this point. Walt touched on it a little bit. We were a little disappointed. There were some folks that we had talked to prior to issuing the RFQ who had expressed a lot of interest in open access networks and then didn't even respond when it actually came out. And so, but we were also really excited when we had a chance to talk to Eric and Hilltop and to see a private provider with no investment, direct investment from the town, be able to build out a network with the kind of quality of internet and speed capabilities and all those things that we've been discussing, and to do that and be able to commit to competitive pricing with the other public providers in the area. We felt like that was a pretty solid path forward for us. So if the board is supportive of that move, then we'll need to prepare that agreement and get through the particulars. How do we deal with pricing structure, and can we establish some multi-year process where that can at least be held for some time? Those kinds of things. We'll negotiate that with Hilltop if the board's supportive of that direction, and kind of create that template, and then bring that back to you for approval.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
I actually just had a question. Sorry I completely forgot the one question that I've been meaning to ask the entire week I read this packet. How long did it take for you guys to successfully build out Platteville? Just timeline general without
So interspersed with some other projects,
Sure.
it was about a 2-year time frame to build.
about
this
2 year
platform.
time. So
That was with a single crew at the time.
Okay.
And like I said, other projects going on, so we didn't have full commitment. Timeline wise for Berthoud specific,
Right.
18 to 24 months is what we target.
So about the same, assuming all of this goes through, no major tech issues or headaches. or
Correct. We've got an
delays.
increased crew capacity now. We've got additional crews on staff and we can build faster these days.
And you feel confident that, once this kind of starts taking root and wheels start turning on this, and that 18 to 24 months is a reasonable amount of
The
connection
only
time
thing
for
setting us
everybody?
back on that, if we have any material slowdowns or
Sure.
poor weather. through the
Obviously,
winter time,
acts of
right?
God and all that,
Yeah,
obviously.
Other than that, yeah, we're pretty confident we can build in that time frame.
Yeah, thank you, that was my only other question.
We all feel good about this?
Yeah.
I feel good too.
Keep it all. keep it
Okay.
close,
Awesome.
Excellent.
We'll start work on that negotiation and get an agreement prepared for you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Elish. Thank you, Eric. This all started with you in 2020 with a board priority to get it on the ballot, so.
Government
Good to see
works
it going.
eventually.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll
yeah.
get there.
That's because they're thorough, that's good.
That train's
Okay.
gotta build up steam.
Next on the agenda is a water dedication requirement at annexation. This is a public hearing. We have Ken Matthews, our Public Works Director, here to present on that. Being a public hearing, it's a little more formal. Director Matthews will give the presentation. Board will have a chance to ask Director Matthews questions. We'll then open it up to the public for any testimony from anyone in the audience. Close that and bring it back to the board for deliberation. All right, thank you. Thanks for being here tonight.
You bet. Glad to be here. So this is a continuation of what was submitted at the last board meeting, which, if you recall, was ordinance, a change to ordinance that requires dedication of historical water rights at the time of annexation, or if an annexation has already occurred at the time of final plat. The only thing that's changed between last week and this week is the emergency nature language in the ordinance was removed, and and that's it for all practical purposes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustees, any questions? Okay, thank you. I'll
I'll open it up to the public. Anyone on the audience that wishes to speak to this? If so, if you could come to the front, state your name and address, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We have no one signed up in person. Is there anyone online by chance?
There is not, Mayor Kurtzbeck.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for deliberation on this. I do want to just make one comment. I think staff has received some comments on this prior, and
We did.
yeah, I felt that a lot of that was directed at you kind of in a negative way, and I think I just really appreciate you guys bringing it to us. I think the board was pretty active and vocal in wanting this too. So I didn't want to take all the pressure on you guys like it was.
No, and I appreciate that. We think this is the right thing to do. I understand some of the comments that were made at the last meeting and some of the concerns that were expressed. The vast majority of those get dealt with during the annexation agreement process, and so some of that is negotiable. And you know, some of the comments that have been raised since the meeting, I've talked to some folks via email, and I think they've raised some interesting points. I don't think it changes our perspective or our path forward. But if as we explore those, we feel like there's an alternative arrangement or some alternative language that needs to be proposed to clarify and enhance what we've already put in the ordinance, then we'll bring that back to you. But we still feel like this is the right thing to do now and to get this clearly on the books and go from there.
All right. Any comments? Trustees? Well, I just appreciate this. It's great to be in line with some of the other communities. It's actually exciting to see the ability to keep our water in our drainage area versus it kind of being sold off and bought by whoever. That we can keep it in our areas, in my opinion, a good deal.
Actually, I guess one or two technical questions for staff. Does this, the drive and drain kind of thing where, you know, water is maybe not as prevalent as it was this past summer, does this prevent that in any way? Or is it just kind of preventing land sale from losing water rights?
Yeah, I think our intention here and the goal of the ordinance is to make sure that water that's been historically used on properties that are being proposed for annexation and development doesn't get sold off to other communities. That it stays here, it stays in our community. That's especially true in native water rights cases because for a lot of reasons, you know, that Pete Johnson, our attorney, could probably explain to you a lot better than I can. You know, native water rights being used on their existing properties, they're a lot easier to work through because of return flow obligations and other things that might be required. And so it's really important to us that we keep those there. Non-native rights like CBT, you know, we've talked a lot about how to handle that in the annexation agreement process. There's going to need to be provisions in that annexation agreement that talk about keeping the water on the land until it's developed, so that they can continue to operate as farms. You know, might get annexed and then not be developed for 3 or 4 or 5 years. We don't want them to be dry and not be able to operate as farms. So there's a lot of those kind of specifics that we can work through in an annexation agreement. But the goal is to just clearly articulate in the ordinance what we would institute as a matter of policy and practice already anyway, based on the board's direction, that in an annexation agreement, that water historically used on the property is dedicated to the town. Timing of transfer and all those things can be dealt with in the annexation agreement. But it needs to be clearly identified which water rights were historically used there, how they're gonna be dedicated to the town, and when they're gonna be dedicated to the town. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long rambling.
It doesn't directly address like the drive and drain, but it does protect the land from that leaving for future
That's
use.
our goal, is we don't want those water rights that have been historically used here to be sold off and used somewhere else.
Are there any properties that we're aware of where that has happened that we're having to deal with?
Sort of. In some cases, they're sold to Little Thompson, or to other water providers in the region. I can't think of one very specifically, but also, we haven't done a lot of annexations in the last 5 years. So most of what's being developed today was annexed quite a long time ago. And so I'm not really sure about the specifics of the properties that were annexed more than 6 years ago.
That's all I had.
Anything else? Sounds like we're supportive of this. Anyone like to vote on it? Ordinance 1330?
I'll move to approve ordinance 1330, an ordinance of the town of Berthoud amending ordinance 1300 concerning dedication of historical water rights.
Excellent, thank you. Is there a second?
One second.
All right, trustee Murphy has moved on this. Mayor Pro Tem Grace has seconded. Is there any final discussion or amendments? Hearing none, clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Ayers, Yes. Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Kurzbek.
Yes, okay, thank you. Ken's still in the room. Oh, hey, thank you, Administrator Kirk, too. All right, we can move on now to appointments to the Planning Commission and Local Licensing Authority. Trustee Ayers and Trustee Murphy did both of those interviews. I'll turn it over to Trustee Ayers.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had one applicant to the local licensing authority. It was a very strong applicant. Good feedback from town staff to the quality of the applicant. It was Mr. Lynn Larson. And I think everyone in the interview decided that regardless of it just being the sole applicant, it was a good choice. And Mr. Larson does a lot for the town and helps out with the licensing authority, has good ideas, and so it was kind of an easy choice to move forward with that. Trustee Murphy.
I've got nothing to add on that one. I could follow on with our planning commission interviews. We had 3 applicants. We interviewed one and we found him to be a good applicant for recommendation. His name would be Mark Hoffmans. He's got experience in the medical device industry. He's from Belgium. Was definitely eager to learn, and I think offers a really interesting perspective that we don't have on the planning commission currently. We also really appreciated the fact that he's looked through the 2021 comp plan, had some ideas there for how we could implement that. So I think he's a solid choice for adding to our planning commission.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions from the trustees? All right, thank you very much. We can move on to Trustee Ayers, or move on there?
Yeah, sure. I move to appoint Lynn Larson to the local licensing authority for a term of 2 years and to appoint Mark Mark Hoffmans to the planning commission for a term to expire May 11th, 2024.
Okay, Trustee Ayers has moved on this. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Grace,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Kurzbek.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Larson and Mr. Hawkins too.
I like when you call him doctor.
If I could call him doctor, he's gonna slash my tires. Lynn is a very underrated guy in all of his academic work, and it should be celebrated that you have a PhD.
Should be.
He's eyeing me right now.
He's
Let's
eyeing
move
me.
on, all right.
Let's call him Larson.
We can move on now to adoption of the 2023 annual budget. And this is also a public hearing. We have, this will be introduced by Administrator Kirk. The public hearing will be the same format as the other. Administrator Kirk will present on this. Trustees have the ability to ask questions. We will then open it up to the public for your testimony, if there's any, and then I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board. Administrator Kirk?
Thank you, Mayor Kurzbek. As you know, on the agenda, we've identified 3 separate approval steps. If it's okay with the mayor and the board, we'll cover all 3 of these items together and answer any questions that you have, but then you can act on them independently. The budget and the fee schedule that was included in your packet represents the budget that we presented to you back in November. We made a handful of additions that we had already discussed during that presentation, the addition of a neighborhood services officer as an example. That was something that was not included in the budget in the first draft that we presented in November, but we mentioned during the presentation that that was an intention of ours to include that in the finals. That is reflected here. And addition of money for Berthoud Local and some partnership that we intend to work through with them next year that will also come back to you via an agreement. But really very few changes to the budget itself. The fee schedule that is presented and included in your packet, excuse me, that includes changes to our recreation programs. Mentioned that last time that those would be reflected there. In most cases, they're between $3 and $5. There's a couple of recreation registration fees that are included in there that increased by close to 10. But our staff does is calculate the cost of providing those programs with the intent that each one of them is net. So, if it costs $1,000 to put it on and we have 100 registrants, then our goal is to charge $10 per registrant. Right? goal isn't necessarily to make profit on those programs, but to break even, and so they go through and make adjustments to those annually. Excuse me. Thank you. In addition to that, we've added some fees to the fee schedule. We've added a couple of fees for our backflow prevention program. And so in areas where backflows are required, annually we require those backflows to be tested and certified, and we need those certifications provided to us in cases where folks don't respond and don't have those certifications done. We've added some minor fees to as penalties, $50 for the first 30 days and those kinds of things. So those are reflected in the fee schedule. And then we've also identified the changes to our water rates that we discussed at the last meeting as well. In general, that reflects a 9% increase for our water and wastewater usage rates kind of across the board. And I'm going to ask Ken to come up. He'll kind of walk you through those changes. Those are the big ones. And then happy to answer any other questions that you might have about the fee schedule that was included.
Thank you.
So, again, similar to the water dedication, this will look a lot similar to what you saw last time. Last time, if you recall, we talked about the completion and the the water wastewater master plan, the development of the capital improvements plan that came out of that, and then the funding or the capital requirements to service that plan, and then the funding that we had available, and then the gap. And one of the ways that we're going to address that gap is through an increase in our wage rates. In addition to the capital plan, I identified that the utility itself is underfunded. We are not covering the costs of the existing infrastructure outside of the required CIPs that were identified in the capital improvement plan. And we're also not keeping up with inflation. And these are numbers similar to what you saw last time, just as a reminder of what inflation has done. I don't think that's need to remind many of that, what it's been doing over the last 5 years. I provided a range of possibilities, and basically what we looked at, we modeled, and we recommended is kind of fall right in the middle of that range, and that is at a flat 9%. We applied that flat 9% to basically all aspects of our water rate structure. The base rate for water and sewer, the dollars per 1,000 gallons for both of those, and then also the miscellaneous fees, connection fees and stuff such as that. What you won't see the 9% applied to is such items such as water meter fees, which is the cost of the meter itself and the installation from my operations staff and stuff like that. That wouldn't apply to that, nor would the storm sewer monthly fees apply to that either. We talked about next year early taking a hard look at the structure of these water rates and how they're levied right now, and making sure that it's all defendable and equitable amongst the populace, and we're hitting the base fee and the usage fee properly so that our utility is balanced and can sustain. One of the examples we gave is an extremely wet year that like we had this year. Not a lot of water was sold, and we went $1 million in the hole. And then on the contrary, you don't want to be on the flip side on an extremely dry year either. So there's some balancing that needs to be done. At the bottom of that slide, you can see an example of what this monthly increase would look like. When I say without irrigation, basically we're looking at October to April and those rates, and that is an increase that includes the water and the wastewater, both base and usage fees. And then if we throw in the average for the whole year, including the irrigation and everything, that's around $8.43 for a standard single-family home.
Can you explain CPI? Is that, I know
It's consumer-
CIP.
Consumer price.
Okay, it's Consumer Price Index, okay. Excellent questions for Director Matthews or Administrator Kirk. So to me, so $1.43 above or $1.03 above, if for irrigation, above not using any, is that correct? Not $8.43 on top of the $7.40, okay. And even with the increased population paying into this, this is basically just accounting for increased costs of operating the system. We're not extending any new service with this, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Director Matthews? Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to the public at this time. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this agenda item, if you could please come to the front, state your name and address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. We have one signed up. Ruth Fletcher Carter. Madam Fletcher Carter, even though I have your address here, do you mind stating it again? Thank you.
Thank you, I failed to do that last time. I'm at 1028 North 4th Street.
Thank you.
In Old Town. And I just want to, first of all, we grabbed your budget this morning, first thing, to see what it said. We were delighted to see the increase for RAFT. And I was really here to tell you that we hope to continue being a partner with the town of Berthoud in providing the best transportation we can provide for the residents of Berthoud and the surrounding area. So we thank you for that. We're voting on our budget tonight and we get to make some amendments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that did not have a chance to sign up? Anyone online, clerk?
There is not, Mayor Carlsbad.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. Gonna do all 3 of these, right? Yep. Sound straightforward to me, I mean, as straightforward as a budget can be, but, and increase in utilities, but I think that's more than defendable and necessary. Not always a good thing to hear from the citizens, but, you know, we gotta do it, otherwise we're not gonna have a, we'll all be recalled.
And hopefully everybody remembers that we haven't had a rate increase in more than 5 years. So we're, in a lot of cases, when you hold rates steady for that long, then you come back and you go, oh, dang, we messed up, now we need a 25% rate increase. And we're fortunate that that's not the case.
Didn't Aurora have a special election now and a recall because they had to raise their rates?
There have been a number of communities around us in the last few years that have done that.
Fingers crossed. I think ours makes sense.
And, you know, ours is really driven primarily by inflation. And so we appreciate the board's support and being able to adjust those and keep us ahead of the curve.
Any other comments? Okay, Trustee Murphy.
Just looking at the budget one more time, I noticed we didn't have a line item for Newell Farm concept plan. Is that something that we don't have a line item for and we can fill from elsewhere later in the year?
That's a great question. I believe we.
I thought it was in the original.
Yeah, I thought it was too. Cindy, do you know off the top of your head? Sorry to holler at you from the audience. I'll have to pull it up. I thought that was in there, and we've actually issued the contract for the initial concept plan to our design team. So that needs to be in there if it's not.
Okay, that's the only thing I noticed.
Could we just approve it with that amendment, Administrator Kirk? Do you need that?
I believe that we can cover it under our existing. We have a couple of other line items where we can cover that. It's a minor expense in the short term, and then we can make an adjustment in mid-year if we need to. If that
That
makes
work for you,
sense.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Anything else? All right, who would, we got 25, 26, and 27. Any board member like to move on 2023-25?
Move to adopt resolution 2023-25, a resolution summarizing expenditures and revenues for each fund and adopting a budget for the town of Berthoud, Colorado for the calendar year beginning on the first day of January 2024 and ending on the last day of December 2024.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Trustee Murphy has seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Mayor Carlsbad.
Yes. Okay, who wants to move on 26? You wanna roll?
You wanna do it? Okay. I move to adopt resolution 2023-26, resolution appropriating sums of money to various funds in the amounts and for the purposes set forth for the town of Berthoud, Colorado for the 2024 budget year.
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this, trustee Murphy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Okay.
Hat trick. All right, I move to adopt resolution 2023-27, a resolution of the town of Berthoud adopting a fee schedule for all town fees as provided in the Berthoud Municipal Code, including rates and fees as discussed at the November 14th, 2023 town board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this as well. Trustee Murphy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes.
We did it.
Excellent, thank you.
Mayor Karsbeck, if I may, really briefly, just want to thank Cindy and all the work that she does, our superstar finance director, in preparing all this information for all of us. And I did find the Newell Farm Concept Plan. It is under professional fees in park development. So that's where we budgeted that money.
Gotcha.
It's just not identified specifically in that line item, but it's under professional fees.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, thank you to Administrator Kirk and to all your staff. That's, budgets are no easy lift, so thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Director
you.
Leach.
Mhm.
Okay, we can move on now to agenda item number 6. That's the 3-mile plan, also a public hearing. And we have Ann Johnson, our Community Development Director, more than just a planner.
That's okay. Mayor Karsbeck and members of the Town Board of Trustees. So this agenda item is to adopt our future land use map as our 3-mile plan. And again, there have been no changes since it was first presented at first reading at the end of November. And just as a reminder, communities are encouraged to do this. Communities are supposed to do this once a year, and we're just adopting our future land use map because that was the vision of the town when we updated our comprehensive plan, that this would be our area of growth.
Thank you. Any questions, trustees?
There's no changes, we're just refreshing the previous approval.
Yep. All right, thank you. Open to the public for this. Is there anyone in the audience, our clerk will check here, that wishes to speak to this? Thank you, clerk. We have no one signed up. Did anyone wishes to speak that did not have a chance to sign up? Anyone online, clerk?
There's not Mayor Karsbeck.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public hearing. And just for the audience, we have discussed this previously. The 3-mile plan was kind of an old way to judge what's around you, and we are just adopting our growth management area as the kind of current way to show the public where development in the future is anticipated. So we're just kind of covering old ground and putting our GMA on top of that. We all feel pretty good about this. Okay, would anyone like to move on?
I move to approve ordinance 1328, an ordinance of the town of Berthoud adopting the town of Berthoud 3-mile plan.
Second.
Trustee Hardy has moved on ordinance 1328. Trustee Ayers has seconded. Is there any final discussion on this? Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Excellent. Number 7 on our agenda tonight is general code changes, also by Ann Johnson.
Hello, Mayor Karsbeck, members of the Town Board of Trustees. There are no changes from what was presented the last time we met. And what we're talking about tonight, there are 4 changes that are being proposed. And again, the first section is you adopted the landscape design guidelines last time. So there are changes to the code where we just need to reference that document. And then there are several items that are currently in the code, such as those planting profiles that show how you should plant the trees, as well as the very limited plant material listing, that now we have a much more broad plant palette that are in the landscape guidelines. So some of those things just need to be removed to clean up and be consistent. Then the next item is on the clarification in the historic preservation portion of the code to clarify what's a major and a minor alteration. The third item is again, the town several years ago eliminated planned unit developments or PUDs. So we're just cleaning up the code to give people reference on what they are, what they used to be. If you want to amend one, what do you need to do now? So we're recognizing that we have them, and then how are we going to proceed with them? And then the last one is just furthering our commitment to the International Dark Sky Association. Since the first time, the only item that was removed was that last section 1 regarding the use of shipping containers for storage, and that was removed from this proposal, and you just have 4 items left. That was the only change, and with that, that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Any questions for Director Johnson? I know to the audience tonight probably looks, we've seen this before, so thank you very much. I'll open it up to the public if anyone in the audience wishes to speak to this. We have none signed up. Anyone in the audience that wishes to speak that did not have a chance to sign up? Do we have anyone online, Clerk?
There is not, Mayor Kurzbeck.
Thank you, Clerk. I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for deliberation. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Anyone? Thank you for all your work, Director Johnson, on this. It's really great to see. Would anyone like to move on this?
I'll do it.
All right.
I move to approve ordinance 1329, an ordinance amending certain sections of the Berthoud Municipal Code, Chapter 30, specifically Section 2 regarding the landscape design, Section 9 regarding historic resources, Section 3 regarding planned unit development, and Section 2 regarding outdoor lighting and dark sky standards.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Ayers has moved on this. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Is there any final discussion or amendments by the board? Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Kurzbeck.
Yes, thank you. Wow. Number 8, our final regular agenda item tonight is the farmstead filing second condition of approval discussion by, I think we have, Director Johnson on this as well.
Mayor Kurzbeck, if I may,
Sure.
I'll go ahead and
Administrator Crick.
introduce this briefly. And then we do have Steve Schroyer here representing the developer, and he has a presentation for you as well. But as some of the trustees may recall, back in August of 2022, the Farmstead Filing 2 preliminary plat was approved. That's everything east of the existing Farmstead Filing 1 that's, for all intents and purposes, is complete, east of there to County Line Road. Filing 2, during that preliminary plat approval process, there was a recommendation by the Planning Commission that a roundabout be installed at County Line Road and Highway 56, which was subsequently supported by the town board and included as a condition of that development. During the presentation at that meeting, there was some discussion about town staff. The developer had been discussing the possibility of a cost share for the roundabout. A significant portion of the traffic through that intersection would be driven by existing background traffic and future traffic from the community and not by the development itself. And so what we had discussed at the staff level with the developer was the possibility of a cost share where we would cover a proportional amount of the cost for the construction of that roundabout. According to the traffic study, the town's share of the traffic through the intersection is approximately 55% of the car trips, and the development would be 45%. And so this is not something that we have traditionally done because the communities where more regional level of improvements have been constructed have been in metro districts or associated with metro districts. And our general policy has been that communities that have an approved service plan that include regional improvements are not cost shared by the town. This is frankly the first one that we've done in my time here where there's been a request to cost share a significant improvement like this. From a town staff perspective, we believe it's appropriate to cost share our proportional share of that roundabout being a regional improvement, and that this project does not have an approved service plan in Metro District. But there is an alternative And that is to install a traditional signalized intersection at County Line Road and Highway 56. The reason that that might be of interest is that it is significantly less expensive than the roundabout, but they both function adequately from a safety and traffic engineering perspective. So the developer has requested that we cost share, and before we bring a finalized reimbursement agreement to you to approve, we wanted to make sure that the board was comfortable with that. And in the case where the board was not comfortable with a cost share and reimbursement agreement, then we would suggest that we work through the process to remove that condition from the preliminary plat and allow the construction of a signalized intersection, which is supported by the town engineer. And one of the primary reasons why this is important is that, as you know, construction costs have increased fairly substantially, and our traffic impact fee, the projects associated with that development of that traffic impact fee include roundabouts being constructed around town to deal with the increase in traffic as development occurs. That's what impact fees are for, right? We collect those and we spend them on improvements to widen roadways or improve intersections to enhance the flow of traffic. And in our traffic impact fee, the estimated cost for a roundabout at the time when those were approved back in 2019, the estimated cost for roundabout was about $2.5 million. So that was our planning number. For context, this roundabout, the estimated cost based on a bid received by the developer is close to $6.7 million. It's shocking, but maybe less shocking in that most of the projects that we bid over the last year, as you know, have been significantly more than what we had originally anticipated. And the same is true in the county. I've referenced this before, but the roundabout that the county is wrapping up right now at County Road 21 and County Road 8, which is the extension of Highway 56 west of town. That project was originally budgeted by the county at $1.5 million and it bid at 3.2. So I think that's the unfortunate reality of the construction industry today. But with those increases in cost, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we want to contribute the amount of money necessary to see this roundabout constructed? That's roughly $3.7 million based on the estimate today. That reimbursement would not be done with cash from the town's current funds, but would be reimbursed with future impact fees collected in the development over time as building permits are issued. So each time a building permit is issued for a house or a commercial project or a multifamily project, impact fees are paid by the builder. And so the way that we've conceived of a reimbursement arrangement in this case would be to reimburse the developer over time as those impact fees are generated. So we wouldn't be outlaying the cash up front, but as that project builds, the impact fees that are collected there would then be reimbursed to the developer until we hit that number that we agreed upon. So that's kind of the structure that we see. If it's okay, we'll ask Steve to come up representing the developer and kind of talk you through. He's got some exhibits to show so you can kind of better understand what it is we're talking about. And then we would look to you for direction. We do have a reimbursement agreement generally prepared. There's some things there that need to still be finalized, but that we could bring to you if that's the direction the board wants to support. And so happy to answer any questions beforehand, but if it's okay, we'll go ahead and have Steve come up and then we can go through it in a little more detail.
Works for me. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Carspect and members of the town board. Steve Schroyer, 900 Greenfields Court, representing Schroyer Resources and the developer Postmodern Development out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Kind of nice to be the last meeting of the year, I guess, and hope everyone has their Christmas shopping done. Nope. Just to get you guys back to where we started, this was August 9th, 2022 is the last time I was before you. This was what Chris was talking about. Farmstead Filing 2 is everything west of County Line Road. Has the commercial, the apartments, the town park, and roughly about 297 units. This is what was presented to you all. The staff findings and recommendations at that time, number 5 you see highlighted, a roundabout shall be constructed at the intersection of Highway 56 and County Line Road. That was from Planning Commission, and this was also the same slide that we presented to you all. Those finding recommendations, we came in and, revised our plans to 2 roundabouts in there. We talked about the major regional improvements, how it would be funded, the right-of-way acquisition near the cemetery on the northeast corner as well, where the dairy is. We talked about the lot impacts at Nebraska, how the phasing of roundabouts could be difficult, and how the signals would meet the 2045 standards. So those are things that we discussed. I'm just trying to refresh everyone's memory from that presentation. This was the roundabout that we had shown back then. You can see the yellow dashed line is the right-of-way line as it's currently today. You can see how the roundabout would impact the cemetery, the dairy, as well as some property on the south side of Highway 56. So after we met with you, there was the findings and recommendations that a roundabout should be constructed at 56 and County Line Road. Even after we showed the 2 side by side of what the signal might look like and what the roundabout might look like. We went through how the signal costs less, but the roundabout is more effective possibly, it's more safe. We went through all those items with you all back in that time. We worked with staff in between Planning Commission and Town Board, and then after that, to talk about the cost share agreement and what that would look like. At the time, we presented that, it would be about 43% of the farmstead development would be attributed to the roundabout. That would be the farmstead on the west side and farmstead on the east side as we continue the project moving forward. We worked with staff on the numbers and what that would all look like with the TIS. Since the last meeting, we've continued to work with staff. Filing 2 has been approved and recorded, as you see it there in the illustrative rendering. We redesigned the roundabout. We positioned and moved it south to not be in the right-of-way, not impact the cemetery and the property to the northeast. We updated the TIS per new conditions. Those new conditions would be the filing 3 that I'll show you in a minute, the railroad crossing of Nebraska, and then a commercial area that we have also as well. And then I'll briefly touch on the roundabout at Tenderfoot that I'll show you in a second. So the old roundabout you see on the left was the bigger, more of a circle. If you look at the roundabout on the right, that's the new roundabout. If you look, it's kind of a little bit more squished and is pulled to the south away from the current right-of-way. That roundabout on the right actually impacts no right-of-way on the north side of 56. We pulled it all internally into our property on Farmstead. This has never been seen before until today. This is a brand new concept. This is our landscape plan that you'll see that we're gonna work with town staff on and what that would look like. I know we joked around having a statue of the mayor in the middle. You can see that didn't make it.
Oh, God, good thing. It'd be destroyed in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it's really, we actually sent this to Ann and staff today. This is the first time they've seen it. We just hit my computer screen today. This is our first take at it. We have not had this priced of what this would cost, but this is our first take of what could this roundabout look like at Highway 56 as you enter the town coming from I-25, if you will. So it looks pretty good. It's a handsome roundabout, very substantial. Of course, we'd have to price this out, see if it fits within the budget and what the town would like to see there. A lot of the landscaping that'll be there would be driven by the town in their review. I talked also about the updated TIS of what we did. You'll see the white line in here goes from Highway 287, Nebraska and Spartan as they connect going across the railroad track. As we were updating our commercial traffic impact study, we noticed that this connection was not taken into consideration in the traffic impact study. This added a substantial amount of trips to County Line Road, which further indicated that Nebraska roundabout should be constructed, which was already a condition of approval. It would then further indicate that some sort of signal or the roundabout on 56 would be warranted. The 2 designs we had, it did not increase any level of service of what would need to be expanded at the roundabout or the signal. What we had designed would still work, and so would the Nebraska roundabout. However, what it did do with our commercial, it triggered a roundabout at Tenderfoot. So this isn't set in stone yet, but what it's looking like is that we would then be responsible for 100% of the Nebraska roundabout, 100% of a Tenderfoot roundabout, and then whatever the share would be for us on the 56 roundabout. So 3 roundabouts in that segment to handle all the traffic. And really what it is, it's all the northbound traffic coming from on County Line Road, as well as the new traffic coming from Nebraska from 287. Essentially what it looks like is people will be skipping Highway 56 or Main Street through town and be using the Nebraska extension to get east-west through the town. So those are some of the items that have changed a little bit since last time. This is a concept commercial layout that we have. I don't know if you guys have seen this before. We're getting ready to submit this to the town probably within a week. We're working on some architectural standards. We have some users. We're actually getting good traction on commercial users for this corner. The buildings that you see in there are really just like essentially dummies right now until somebody actually signs up to bring a final site plan and FDP to you guys. So this is kind of what it would look like. You see the roundabout in the northeast corner of the drawing of 56, kind of the squished roundabout. How it would come south with the right in and right on into the commercial center and then through Tenderfoot roundabout, then we continue on south. If you have any questions as I'm rolling through here, feel free to stop me. Then we also updated the TIS with the filing 3. I don't think you guys have seen our final filing 3. We actually have this into town. I think we're to receive our comments and by this Friday possibly, and this will be coming to planning and zoning for the neighborhood master plan. But this adds another 564 units and additional commercial in the northwest corner. So once you add all that in there, you get a final plan that kind of looks something like this. You can see the Nebraska roundabout go further north to the Tenderfoot roundabout, move further north to the Highway 56 roundabout with the apartments, the commercial, and all the community parks as you see as we've been moving through this project. So that's kind of where we are today with the final plan as we move through this project. So where we are, Farmstead Filing 2, there was a condition of approval that the roundabout be constructed at the intersection of 56 and County Line Road. During that board meeting, we did discuss it with the town about talking, like Chris talked about, paying the town's fair share, 57% to the town and developer 43%. We have initial design for the roundabout routed through CDOT. We've already expended probably $125,000 for the design and construction documents and the review with CDOT. We're very far along with the roundabout. We have a solicited bid for construction, estimated the cost is $6.7 million. We're working to get another bid and trying to bring that down, but as it stands today, that was our best bid that we had. That was also from the developer, the builder, the GC that would be building Farmstead Filing 2 for us. So there's some economies of scale by having the same contractor on site to do both projects. And whereas the town's 57% equals about 3.8 million, and our share is 2.8 million. The town's engineer has reviewed the plans and costs and deemed them accurate. You can say, like Chris was talking about, why is this so expensive? As soon as you get all these bids that I'm getting today, as soon as I fall out of my chair for every bid, you go back and look at it and notice that the CDOT specs are very extensive. Just the class 4 road base that's underneath the roundabout and all the concrete doubles the project. I mean, if we could do asphalt through there, it'd be so much cheaper, but we can't. We have to do concrete, for instance. But the long-term maintenance of the roundabout would be longer. So what our request is what Chris talked about, that we partner together to build this 56 roundabout. We're gonna be on the hook to do the Nebraska and the Tenderfoot roundabout regardless. The town's share of construction costs will be funded by the reimbursement through our own building impact fees for the roadway impact fee, not funded up front in one shot. So as we pull building permits, we would be either reimbursed or those fees would be waived as we pull the permit. And this would not exceed the town's agreed upon share as we move through the project. If the town does not wish to cost share, as Chris mentioned, we go back to the signal because it is a little bit cheaper for us and it does function to 2045 levels. But we're here tonight to see if we can partner with you guys to build this roundabout and move forward with the project. The why, as you saw not the rendering, but the concept plan, it is a significant gateway as you enter town. Landscape, art, signage, just of here I am, I have arrived at Berthoud. Whatever you guys would like to see in the middle of the roundabout, how you want it to look, it could look like that. It does solve the regional issues at the intersection that everybody who drives through there at peak hours understands the impact at intersection. It's been designed also, it does not impact neighboring properties. If we did do the signal, we would need right away on the north side of 56. It is designed with scalability to handle future growth out to 2045. And as we all know, roundabouts seem like they're deemed to be more safe. So that's what I have for our high-level presentation, and I entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Questions, trustees? Trustee Hardy.
Since this is still a CDOT highway, do they contribute any funds for things like this? Not at all? They just get to dictate and tell us how to do it.
Well, yeah, I want to, okay, sorry, I got a question related to that.
And then that 6 million, does that include all the landscaping or is that
Yeah, we
just
have
the
numbers,
infrastructure?
we have numbers in there for the landscaping, infrastructure, project management, clear down to soils testing.
And then who's responsible for the maintenance of all that landscaping, you guys or the town?
I believe it would be the town because it'll be future right-of-way dedicated.
It's like the landscaping at the roundabout at First Street, that's technically CDOT right of way, but we're responsible for maintaining it.
We're working to provide raw water to irrigate it at the intersection, so we are working towards that with Ken.
Trustee Chris.
Yeah, you might have covered this, but so there's 3 roundabouts in kind of the proposal. If you were to turn the county line and 56 roundabout into a signalized, I guess, light, would that then change the other 2 intersections to signalized, or would those remain a roundabout?
Definitely Nebraska would remain as a roundabout. And for what I'm seeing happening, I would think Turnberry is, I mean, not Turnberry, but it's another project. Tenderfoot would also need to be a roundabout as well, to get the traffic out of the commercial area on the left turn.
Okay.
And that's really what's triggering it. The amount of traffic coming north and making a left out is becoming very cumbersome. So it appears that there's gonna be 2 roundabouts at least.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how binary our decision was. It's really just focused at that intersection and doesn't have kind of a trickle effect through the plans. So, cool. That was it.
Other questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
So I guess when you brought up earlier, the roundabouts here are designed to be scalable. So as time goes by, they can be expanded as need be, is kind of my understanding. I've got plenty of examples where roundabouts have absolutely failed in terms of scalability or usability. The roundabouts in Johnstown, the Centera area, like there's 3 in a row, and you catch that at the wrong time, you're just sitting there and it's supposed to be fast, and it isn't. Or the one up north near Prairie Star, that one, when it gets congested, it gets weird. So I guess my question in terms of scalability, what are you going to be designing to make sure it doesn't turn into a pile?
CDOT had all of those examples plus a bunch more that they had us study and said, we are not gonna do this.
Okay.
So we started with a fresh slate of what not to do.
Okay.
And they were very
The
keen
old
to
birth
that
of
idea.
examples they're passing out.
Yeah, they're very keen to that idea of what this thing should look like and what it should not look like to function in the future.
So in terms of scalability, you're also making sure right away is such that if another lane has to be installed because people can't read signs in time or the
Correct.
painting isn't right. Okay, I'm just making sure, because once these things are built, with that right of way in place, it makes it really, really hard to make it not bad.
That's some of the added costs. I mean, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
some of the added costs they allow for all of it.
Right, and that'll be a future when we get there, but it's more just making sure that this is getting looked at with the best information we have on hand and not just, boilerplate, looks good, and we'll figure it out later kind of thing.
Yeah, this was not boilerplate. This is one that we designed fresh.
Yep,
Thus,
which-
$50,000.
That's refreshing to hear, because sometimes it's just, just copy paste and we'll line the lines up, it's fine, no, it doesn't, but.
We do, we are constrained on the north side because of the cemetery, and
Yep.
so it was great that they were able to design the roundabout and push it south onto the farmstead property so that we wouldn't, in the original configuration, it literally would have required moving graves, which we weren't gonna do.
We were close.
And so it, and it would, construction would have significantly impacted the cemetery. And so being able to push it south, more into the farmstead property did help alleviate some of that constraint on the north side.
I have a functionality question. So clearly kind of like an oval or like squished circle, and I'm sure I've been in those, but I just think of roundabouts in my simple mind as a circle. Are those somewhat common? Are those examples of those being successful and safe and all that?
I mean, CDOT has reviewed this exact model probably 3 times as we're going back and forth, and they deem it safe and they like it.
Okay.
They like it a lot.
It's about
It's about round.
One of the
About
interesting,
roundabout.
one of the interesting thing about roundabouts is, in a lot of cases, they're not round.
Yeah.
And so not in the circular sense. They can be kind of oddly shaped. One of the ones out by I-25 is actually a little bit teardrop shaped. It has kind of a very interesting kind of shape to it, and so they can function in a lot of kind of different configurations that aren't traditionally round.
Yeah, when you're in it, I was gonna say, I'm sure I've been in ones that are like this or similar, but just.
In a lot of cases, you don't recognize it, but
That's
then
right. Yeah.
if you look at it from a satellite map, you're like, wow, that's not really a circle at all.
Yeah, right. Cool.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Trustee Harris.
Administrator Kirk, you said that the town has never cost shared with anyone for this kind of thing before. Have there been any other developments that had to change a major highway? You know of?
The best example is Prairie Star and Heron Lakes. The roundabout at Grand Market was impacting CDOT right-of-way and had to go through some CDOT review. It's out of CDOT right-of-way, but because of how close it is to the intersection, that was not that was a significant undertaking. There are things about that roundabout that maybe should have been designed differently. You know, so there's some good lessons learned there from, you know, the days gone by. And there are gonna be some improvements to that roundabout as Prairie Star moves forward with their final phase. They're gonna add a lane and do some of the things that make that roundabout kind of wonky.
Great.
So we'll get to fix some of that. But that's the best example I could probably think of from a transportation standpoint.
Okay, so no direct changes to any highway around town. This is the first time that that's actually been an issue.
The other would be, West Side Crossing is required to construct a signal at Metal Arc in 56. You may or may not recall, I can't remember if you were on the board at the time when West Side Crossing came through. We did ask them to do a Rodell study and consider a roundabout there. Because of the size of that roundabout, we would have had to buy and demolish the quick corner, which we didn't feel like was an appropriate thing to do at the time. And so we decided to go with the signal because it functions well enough. It's adequate for current and future traffic demands in the long-term planning horizon. That one is not constructed yet, obviously, but it is part of their commercial phase and should be constructed soon. That does impact the major highway.
Okay, thank you.
I know one question that's come up before with the roundabouts, so I'm looking at here, the crossing areas. Looks like there's, I guess there is it's just really small on the north side. It's not as marked with as many hash marks, but how does this like fit in, I'm assuming, with other trails, and how wide are they? How big are the crossings? Are there gonna be any lights or any indicators that there's a pedestrian in the roundabout? Cause it's gonna be a pretty busy roundabout compared to some of these others that we've got. It's a major highway versus further in town and stuff.
Yeah, we're not through a CDOT approval yet. We're probably 80% through. Those final fine details will probably be brought in if it needs to be done. Going north, it really isn't anywhere to go. Most of the crossings will be, I guess, in the south, going east and west on the south side of the roundabout. That's where we'll have sidewalks on the west side with the commercial when it's developed, as well as then going south along County Line Road, the sidewalks will be there. And then it will connect to the trails throughout the property.
Okay, cause I was like, thinking about cause one of the requests that has happened up by Heron Point and stuff like that are putting the blinky lights in on the roundabout so that if someone's crossing on one side of it, you're not coming around and all of a sudden seeing them. There's been concern about the safety of pedestrians versus just the safety of the vehicles coming.
Make a note of that to bring that up to our engineers as we move forward.
Other questions? Mayor Pro Tem.
Just last one, and in terms of, I think there's a ditch that kind of runs on the northeast corner of Farmstead 2 area. I think that's Handy Ditch. I think it's a waterway access ditch. Just making sure that this is not going to be causing headaches and heartaches for any of the people who own that ditch or the water line.
Southeast corner?
Yes.
Yes, it's the McIntyre, and you can see it there. That's what the topo lines are.
Okay.
We'll have right here. This is it right here.
Okay.
So it actually pops out right here and goes east. When this commercial comes in, we plan on rerouting it along the north side of the right of way.
Okay.
To where it goes.
Okay.
So right now, it's actually not even impacted. The head gate is outside of the right of way.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just making sure that we're looking at this now before stuff gets moved and courts and lawyers get involved. So yeah. As long as that was considered. Yeah.
Any other questions? Trustee Kurtz? Okay.
Just
I heard your mouth.
piggyback, if I may, Mayor, back to Trustee Ayers' question, the round about impacts on highways and prior cost shares. The roundabout at Grand Market that was funded half by Prairie Star and half by Heron Lakes, the two metro districts associated with that development. They split the cost of that. And the town did not participate in the construction of that roundabout. But again, there was two metro districts there with infrastructure funding through the district to be able to construct those improvements.
Just Tally's on the mind. Have we approached Ludlow and saying you're gonna drive a lot of this? Are you gonna pay into it?
Ludlow Farms?
Yeah.
That's a good question. They will pay into it in the sense that there'll be, there will be a lot of road impact fees generated from their project as well.
So should we just wait for that? I mean, our accounting is necessarily hard sometimes with how these go in, but I mean, we've had this kind of issue in the past where the cost shares haven't always seemed to line up. Have we approached them though?
In terms of, no, we have not approached them about cost sharing this roundabout. And in general, when we do a traffic impact study, there are, for each development, there are a number of improvements that are identified. Like for instance, they have several significant improvements that they'll have to make, regional traffic improvements. And there may or may not be cost sharing arrangements that we might propose to you for that. They are, I think, intending to propose a Metro District Service Plan to you, so that would change the nature of our recommendation at the staff level, and they're aware of that. And so they'll have a number of regional transportation projects to do. If we were to cost share those, we would do the same thing. We'd pay for them with the transportation impact fees that we collect. And again, those impact fees are intended to mitigate the impacts of growth by building regional transportation improvements like roundabouts or signals at intersections or widened roadways that aren't covered by the development's traffic impact study and their required improvements. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
like they'll pay impact, they're gonna build regional improvements and pay traffic impact fees. Farmstead will build a regional improvement like the County Line Road and 56 roundabout and pay impact fees. We're suggesting here that we might cost share the town's proportional share of the traffic through that roundabout with their impact fees that will get paid in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so can you walk me through that again? Because when I hear the town's gonna pay for it, I hear that growth's not paying for itself. But this is coming through their impact fees, so
Yeah, it
the
is. So
developer's
growth
paying
is
for this.
paying its way.
There's no tax money going into this.
That's 100%
There's no
true.
sales tax,
That is 100% true.
but we're fronting it?
No,
So
so we're
it's
not
going in at
fronting,
time.
and
Okay.
that's something that, you know, Steve and I talked about quite a bit. That I wasn't comfortable recommending to you that we front that money, because we have been collecting regional transportation impact fees. But we have other projects that are already prioritized, including the Spartan Avenue crossing of the railroad and things like that for those impact fees that we've already collected. And so the only way that we felt like we could make this recommendation is by pledging future impact fees generated by their project. So that growth is paying back the developer for the town's share of that regional
Okay.
improvement.
So that's what I heard.
So
So no sales taxes, no property taxes associated with the reimbursement.
Okay. I guess my other questions aren't really geared toward this particular project. How did that go with the MPO when we tried to? So last week I just approved 15 million worth of funds. 2 of them were roundabouts.
So I
did
spoke
that
to
go?
Suzette Millette, the director at the MPO, about possible grant funding for
Yeah.
this. The problem with, and we talked about CMAQ funding in particular, congestion mitigation, air quality, that's not an uncommon thing to use for roundabouts. A lot of emissions are generated by the stop and start of cars, and so roundabouts, because they generally keep vehicles moving, you eliminate that start and stop, or you reduce that start and stop. So CMAQ is a good funding source for roundabouts, but in the open call for projects they had last year, those funds would likely not be available or programmed until 2026, and they can't be spent on projects that are already complete. And so if we did that, and she didn't know that that would be a really competitive application because it's associated with a new development, but we wouldn't be able to build the improvement until at least 2026, because if we started it now, then it wouldn't be eligible for the grant funds.
So we're kind of partially in this boat because there was no action, right, for a couple of years. We have a security from the developer that they're ready to go right away. The applicant. Okay.
Yeah, we've worked through I think the kind of the last pieces of the development agreement. That's kind of in fact, we just met today for a couple hours to go over those last few items. We are gonna suggest that we, independent of this will be coming to you in January, but that we fund the oversizing of a sewer line through the project that will serve future development. And again, that would be with impact fees, not with user rates and things like that. We do have a line oversizing policy in our code that says if you're gonna build a sewer line bigger than what's needed for your development, because we've asked you to, that we can pay for the increase in pipe size, and we can pay for the increased, size of valves, which are more expensive, and some of those things. We do not have a signal or roundabout, cost sharing or oversizing policy in our code. So the sewer one we'll bring back to you, again, that's related to the provisions that are in the Berthoud Municipal Code. This one is similar, but there are no code provisions that suggest the town will do this from a transportation standpoint. But I do believe it is conceived of generally in the road impact fees in the way that those were calculated.
What would you use if this weren't cost shared on? I'm also worried about a future precedent of every developer after this saying, well, you did that, even without an trail. What would you use this for otherwise? Expansions, of course.
Yeah, we would use it for road widening. We would use it for intersection improvements. In the original road impact fee study, there's all these spreadsheets, layered spreadsheets with, future impact or future improvements that we believe will be necessary related to growth. And those are generated by kind of all this regional background traffic, right? All this traffic moving around, not necessarily. It's easy when you have a commercial project and you have a pretty good idea of how many trips are going to come and go from that site out onto the road and which direction they're going to turn. But there's all this kind of background traffic of people just moving around the community. And as the community grows, that background traffic increases, right? So we outline all the improvements we think are going to be necessary in order to accommodate that growth and to mitigate that impact. We assign, costs of all those improvements with, kind of long-term cost escalators, which unfortunately in our case are below what we've seen recently. But we collect all that money with the intent that over that long-range horizon that we're collecting these impact fees for, we'll be able to fund these improvements. We did include 3 roundabouts in that study, but we didn't specify where they would be. At the staff level, we assumed one would be at Spartan and Berthoud Parkway. One would be here at County Line Road and 56. And another might be just in another place in town where we haven't already conceived of one. There could be one on First Street or Berthoud Parkway or some of these other kind of regional routes. And so those weren't specifically identified in that road impact fee. We just said we believe there will be at least 3 roundabouts that will be necessary in this long-range planning horizon to accommodate growth. And so again, I think that's why we feel comfortable at the staff level saying we expected growth to pay for these improvements, including potentially a roundabout like at 56 and County Line Road. And that's part of the reason why we set the impact fee for roads where it is, to generate enough money to pay for these kinds of improvements.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It's scary, but I get it.
Yeah,
It's not coming out of our pocket. We have a policy that growth doesn't only pay for itself. It's supposed to enhance quality of life, and that's near impossible to hit. So,
and that's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's hard when you get a roundabout in the way and it slows you down. But that my final question, I think Tim's makes sense, but we can put a condition on this for RRFB, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think especially on that south crossing, what would be the one on the bottom of the roundabout on the graphic that's on your screens that you can see. I think there's especially some sense to that as that area develops. In the short term, when Filing 2 develops, there won't be anything to cross to. It'll be an empty farm field on the east side of County Line Road. But as that project builds on the east side, and then there's commercial on both sides, you're going to want pedestrians to be able to go back and forth between those 2 areas and as safely as possible. So I think having some RFBs included at those strategic locations at the roundabout would make a lot of sense.
Have we, and the staff looked into, I'm going off of Trustee Hardy's comments, have we looked into how this fits into our Trails Master Plan?
Only in the sense that there is.
I just want to make sure that these aren't wide for a sidewalk, but the trail's way wider, so we don't run into a vantage situation where you have to slow down because it goes to 4 feet. We don't have this running into any trail, do we?
Not in our regional trails. The regional trail that runs east-west is south of this roundabout.
No, but, okay, right. But there's no other trails, right? Okay. That's all my any other questions?
That trail actually comes out, hits the south part of the commercial area.
The trail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Closer to the other roundabout.
Yeah,
Just
south of the roundabout. Yeah,
My
south.
whole point, probably, just to explain, I just didn't want to make sure it narrowed down, that if it was a trail, it'd stay wide. So we don't run into a situation that happened in the past. That's my only questions. Okay, thank you. This time I'll open it up to the public, if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this. Is this not a public? All right, we don't see anyone online, clerk?
There is not, Mayor Kreisberg.
Okay. How's everyone feel about it?
I think it looks great. I think the potential of the landscaping at the very least adds to the entire area. Especially with that commercial planned on both sides of County Line Road. I think having the landscaping there as opposed to a four-way stop is something to look at. It's an entrance into the town.
It's a garden spot.
Yeah, right. And I think especially on the highway like that, during rush hour traffic, 56 gets pretty busy, and I do not like the idea of sitting at a light like up at what is it, 402 up in Loveland? The traffic basically stretches all the way out to the exit. And anything we can do to mitigate that kind of backup, I think, helps. So.
I know, we all know how people love roundabouts, but I'd rather have this than, like you
Yeah.
said, stacks of cars waiting at a stoplight.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree, and being on the MPO, you just hear it again and again how much safer, these really are safer than it. I think they're harder on pedestrians, but the other thing is with truck traffic, they generally don't like these, and having 56, you're gonna have to turn more on 56 than you would on County Line Road,
Yep.
since this is an oval. So a truck's gonna have a tougher time than even a regular roundabout. But I think
There's some nice big run up there. I can see the little half moon shapes of curb there that they can run over.
Okay. It's still an oval, but you're right, good point. And I just generally have a problem with setting a condition and then waiting a while and that not being met, so staff's kind of coming back. But in this case, being 56, and I think, in my opinion, you are bearing a brunt of a lot of stuff that's not your fault. We have a lot of other development in town that you're kind of hitting the brunt of it. It makes sense that I think we used to use impact fees to help out some of that.
Yeah, they've got at least one or two more roundabouts to go through before they get to this one, so they'll have practice out at I-25.
Yeah.
And one thing I may mention that I think is related to this conversation, we talked about it previously. We know that we need to update our non-utility impact fees, and specifically because inflation outpaced our estimates when we developed those fees 4 years ago. And so that's on our list to do this year anyway.
Okay, good.
So our impact fees are, frankly, I think it's not a surprise, they're likely to increase. And so that will help additionally fund this, and considering that we'll actually have a specific number here, that'll give us a better idea of what future roundabouts might cost as we update those.
How quickly is that coming? It seems like if that's gonna be late in the year, that might be worth some kind of moratorium or conversation with developers, unless we're really pushing that, because we're
Yeah.
losing money in that case.
Our goal would be to be done, halfway through the year or so, and I think we're fine from that perspective. There won't be enough development, I think, between now and then that it'll be substantially a problem in the long run, right? Because what we're looking at is, if every project contributes 3,000, or every house contributes 3,000 or 3,500, depending on what that kind of, what that ultimate calculus ends up at, in the next 6 months or so, there's not gonna be a significant difference in the amount of money that we're able to collect. And so, we feel like we're okay where we're at, because there are improvements in there that we think we can do for less money than we might have anticipated in terms of road widening, or that there are alternative ways to handle some of those issues where we might, where traffic's being redirected and we're not gonna have to widen the road like we thought we would. So I think there's always some give and take in those impact fee estimates, because you can't, you base them on what you think you're gonna have to build based on your long-range transportation plan, like what was included in our comprehensive plan. But ultimately, there's always some give and take there. It kind of balances out. But, what we really want to do is just capture the increases in construction costs that we've seen in the last year.
Okay, well, the only thing, I don't wanna take, the only thing to add is I really agree with Trustee Hardy's points. I think we've actually seen the RRFB being used at Prairie Star. I have driven past it a couple times. I'd really recommend we put that in as a condition. Yeah, it adds the cost, but might prevent something terrible to have blinky lights.
Is that a thing we would do here, or is that something that would come back when they submit final plats?
I think it's okay to kind of give us that direction now if you want. I don't know that we couldn't impose it as a condition of the plat, but we could impose it as a condition of finalizing this agreement that we include
We could do a cost share, I don't know, cause so I'm
It'd
thinking of
all
it
be
also,
part of
it's
the
not
cost
only
of the
east-west, but that's the only restroom right there, even the condition that terrible condition that graveyard restroom's in, I get complaints on it, so I know it's being used by construction workers already at Farmstead. So I could see that, I could see a lot of north-south traffic too, not just east-west.
We can't agree to the blinky lights, they'd have to be approved by CDOT.
So what if we did
can
something that,
try
unless
for it.
denied by, yeah, unless
Yeah,
denied
I
by
think that's
CDOT.
appropriate.
Yeah, CDOT made a
Yeah.
too distracting. Don't let us put flashing lights out of the artwork pieces.
And what
These are
we'll,
pedestrian.
sorry, what we'll bring back to you is this reimbursement agreement that'll specify the actual cost that we expect, and what we're agreeing to, including, you know, the details about RFBs and all that, so, our goal would be to bring that back to you in January with that, you know, final reimbursement agreement for you to approve.
Work for everyone?
I got the amendment written too.
Any other points, comments? Trustee Murphy?
I'll just make some additional points on this, just to get them out there. From a safety standpoint, you know, these are some stats I got from CDOT. It's a 35% reduction in all accidents, 78% reduction in fatal and injury accidents, 89% reduction in pedestrian injuries. I think, well, I've been watching this on planning commission for a long time. I think it's really unfortunate we weren't able to make it work on the west side of town with one of the intersections for a roundabout. But this intersection here, I think it's really critical to get this roundabout here just for the safety, for the speeds that we're dealing with out on 56. And this is a way that we have some control. With the lights on 287 and Bertha Parkway or at 56, we don't have much say over how those operate. Here we can put a physical impediment to any kind of speeding that goes on. We can make that intersection more safe and take it off the table for, you know, problems in the future, hopefully. And I think it's really complementary to what we have going on there. We have the cemetery and the Newell Farm Park.
Yep.
And it complements our rural aesthetic, so I'm fully behind this, so.
Awesome. Slow down, you're in Bertha.
Yeah.
Sit out a light.
What are you gonna do,
Get
giant ramp?
frustrated.
Yeah.
Don't feel like in the city.
Well, that's a good point too, 'cause I mean, I just meant from, this goes back to that walk audit that, Administrator Kirk and I, did, some others too, but the walk for pedestrians, you're crossing twice, but it is a good point that they're even more traffic lights are more dangerous for, that's awesome study to hear.
Sure.
I think cause it's a right turn lane, everyone's looking left, you get hit all the time, so.
And that's the beauty of roundabout is that as a pedestrian, you only have to look at one direction of traffic. And so that helps. Plus, there's always a median refuge, where a pedestrian they only have to cross one lane. Now they're in a semi-protected median, and then they can look the other direction and cross one lane. And so
Kinda like Frog.
they are a little bit wonkier to navigate, but you know, I think the data, that's great data I actually hadn't seen, so.
Yeah, that's great.
Really glad that we're kind of all on the side of safety here. I know that this intersection is not exactly the friendliest, and people have lost their lives here.
That's true.
Not just like one or two, but just under the CDOT minimums for them to install a light, is kind of my understanding. So this is, I'm glad we're making this decision.
Always put a sign up there that says, if you don't like this roundabout, just remember, we just have one cemetery.
I just
Boulder County
remembered
engineer.
something as well. I really appreciate the financing mechanism on this. I think it really makes sense and it makes it easier to swallow, I guess.
All right, anything else? Mayor Pro Tem?
No, so, I mean, we don't actually have a motion, it's more just along the lines of, I think sounds like we're all in favor of issue one and to have them install blinky lights unless CDOT refuses installation of it for CDOT reasons.
Is there a second? Oh, we don't need that,
Nope,
yeah.
no move.
Anyways,
Yeah,
let's just
we'll
do,
We'll bring that back to you,
Motion?
for final
yeah,
approval.
let's do a motion anyways, just to make that safe.
Is
Mayor
that-
Pro Tem, can you say that without?
Yeah, move to direct staff to choose option one of roundabout construction with cost sharing agreement and to be negotiated between the applicant and the town as outlined in the attached materials. Reimbursement would come from the form of traffic and impact fees and collected at the time of building permit, and to place pedestrian lights around the roundabout unless refused by CDOT.
Is there a second?
There you go.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this, Trustee Murphy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on that?
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
trustee Hardy.
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Okay, we do have reports first on this, but I'd like to do the executive session. It's all right with the trustees. If you want to come back, provide direction under reports. Does that work with everyone?
Sure.
Okay. So in that case, we'll do executive session up here, folks, and that means we'll leave the room. And this is for it'll be under the motion, but then we'll come back and do our regular reports. Would anyone like to move us into executive session? You, trustee.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Go fast.
I move to enter into executive session for the discussion of a personnel matter under CRS section 24-6-402 parentheses FI and not involving any specific employees who have requested discussion of the matter in open session, any member of this body of any elected official, the appointment of any person to fill an office of this body or of an elected official, or personnel policies that do not require the discussion of matters personal to particular employees, and the following details are provided: Town Administrator Annual Evaluation.
Thank you, trustee Ayers. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace is seconded. Clerk, give me a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everyone. At this time, we'll adjourn to the other room.
Yeah.
Sergeant Williamson for waiting around, and Deputy Clerk and Clerks,
Gotta deal with all the rights.
and Attorney Smith.
My pleasure.
We'll just move on now to reports. Let's just start out with Administrator Kirk's annual evaluation. We've done, obviously, we're not gonna take action tonight, but we'd like to direct Attorney Smith to take Administrator Kirk's current contract with the 3% already built into that, include an additional 3% raise, plus an additional 5% bonus, which would bring it up to 228,660.
Yep.
Plus an additional 40 hours a week. And I'd like to add for the record,
40
a
hours a
year,
year.
yeah, 40 hours a week.
40 hours a
Yeah,
week.
you never have to work again. Yeah. I just wanna state for the audience tonight, Administrator Kirk did not request anything this year. We just felt that, especially given last year, things coming down the wire and how hard he's worked. He definitely deserved what he's requested years prior. The 40 hours a week was no request at all. We just noticed how hard Chris is working. Noticed, we hope he takes some more time off just to be with family and whatnot, and doesn't have to feel the need to be around here all the time. So the board is very satisfied, plus with our current town administrator. Do you have any questions? Does that work for you?
Thank you. I don't know, Attorney Smith, did you have any additional questions?
Give me the 40 hours.
Plus 40 hours a week annually.
Okay.
No,
40 hours a year.
Weird.
Total
40
4
hours
weeks
a
of
year.
vacation.
and-
Chris, I'm trying to help you out.
I think
Does
I've
that work?
got it.
228,660 plus an additional 40 hours.
Just say 4 weeks for the year.
And I'll work on it like I usually do and run it by the mayor first
Perfect.
anyway
Yep.
to make sure. Okay.
And then
I mean, 60
that might go to, does that need to get approved at official reading?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to that first meeting in January.
Okay,
We've
awesome. We got that done. Let's
See
move
the
on to,
evaluation done.
yay, yeah,
Thank you very
within the
much.
same year. And we'll move on to Trustee Kurtz.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything substantial though. I did attend, or actually was in the parade the other week, and that was a lot of fun. And yes, it's a nice tradition here in town, or newly reminted tradition.
What were you in with, Northern?
Northern had a float, so I was right in the back
Oh,
of the
missed
pickup
it.
truck with my son, and he was kind of. I think he was excited, but I think he was overwhelmed.
He was down the parade?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I missed all that because I was in the fire truck with Sick Santa, so.
Oh, no.
That's awesome, though. I'd love to, there's a
Yeah,
video out.
I
haven't
couldn't
watched.
hear your speech, so Santa was sick.
It was a mess.
Yeah, it was a mess. Okay. You don't need to enter details into the public record, but yeah.
It's nothing crazy, you just, I didn't want to steal from your report, so.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's a video out, I haven't watched yet, but it sounds like all the reports were great. It's actually a tradition that the chamber started, but Tim Hardy really
Oh,
got to life, so with Main Street, so.
okay, cool.
You got a lot of credit to Tim for doing all that.
Yeah, good event, but that's it for me.
Awesome. Trustee Hardy?
This was, I did have a question. Well, maybe it's no big deal, but we usually do a little town Christmas party. Is that gonna be in January when we go bowling again?
Yeah, so we've been doing the town winter party.
Lexi?
Yep. Lexi and Christian did an awesome job putting that on. Lexi did a really great job last year. But we typically do it after the holidays just because there's so much stuff going on for kind of
I'm
the
just excited for it.
Christmas season. But yes, we are planning to do another winter party after the holidays.
And then I did read the sheriff's report.
Mhm.
I did like that. I did have a question though. I think I know the answer, but just want clarification. The number of calls and responses, you can include other communities within the county. I'm assuming a lot of those communities are smaller because they have their own police forces and those are just the county calls, correct? Like Estes Park and I only had like 4 calls. I mean, you put down there, we had like 600 and some calls and we were 45% of the calls or something like that, or?
Are we looking at the monthly report or
The one we just got today.
That was the monthly.
the monthly? Okay, I just wanna make sure I'm looking at the right report.
Okay. Cause it just seemed like we had a lot of calls, but then, you're our only response team, so.
So, let me get that up so I make sure I can address this correctly here. Sorry, it's loading.
Remember dial-up?
Into murderer robots.
Yeah.
Not quite that bad.
Dad in the background.
Um,
Get off the phone.
Gotta get that broadband put in. anyway, while we're waiting, I just wanna thanks for the report, I do appreciate them, I do
Yep.
read them. Like Chris's reports and the other reports of this town staff too.
So Bertha, just off the top of my head, Bertha generally is either the first or second busiest district in the entire county. So they break it down amongst our 7 districts for our patrol deputies. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the general Loveland, Fort Collins areas. 5 kind of sits over the top, but it's mostly incorporated area. There's not a lot left in our District 5. It kind of sits over the 4 corner areas of the 4 districts. And it encompasses a little bit of the mountain and then out towards the Timoth area, which most of it's all incorporated now. So that district doesn't have a lot of calls. District 6 is our Estes district, and District 7 is the mountain districts up by Red Feather in those areas. Very sparsely populated calls there. And then we have our 2 contract towns, Berthoud and Wellington. And this month, I think, was looking at the report, we're within 100 and something calls from our District 1, our busiest call, which that includes our Mulberry Corridor, which has 11 hotels, one of the highest crime rate areas in the county, and we're, as a small town, within 100 calls of that busy district. So generally either first or second in the county for a number of calls, so.
Seems like we keep you guys pretty busy.
Yeah, we see really busy. I think we're generally about 35%, so 35% dispatch calls, 65% self-initiated calls. So deputies out there are doing extra checks, traffic stops, doing drug interdiction, stuff like that, which we've been fairly successful with, so.
It's always interesting to read through that report and just see things that you don't see and then you go, wow, that really happened in our town?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's part of why we started giving you those weekly reports, so you guys have a little bit more detailed idea of what we're handling on a weekly basis, so.
It is great.
Looking at the report today or looking at our dashboard, so far year to date, the sheriff's office has had 52,000 calls for service amongst self-initiated and calls for service, so 52,000 contacts with the public.
100 a
so.
week for a full calendar year, so.
1,000 a week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
say.
so I thought, yeah, numbers.
Yeah, and we're not even done, we still have a few weeks left
Yeah,
to
you're
to
right.
wrap out the year, so we'll
That's
probably be.
1,000, that's not just Bertha, that's all.
No, that's the entire county.
That's still crazy.
I'm trying to see if we have that on here right now, so.
Nuts.
But yeah, I read it like twice and I was gonna go back and read it again.
Yeah, so the calls for service, Bertha had 607 compared to our District 1.
District 1 is like the next big one up there with us.
Yeah, well, this one's showing 596. We're actually a few calls over that one in this area, but there's another one that shows us just under the other one. But 52,000 calls for the year for the sheriff's office that we've handled, either a traffic contact or a call for service, so a lot of contact with the public. Any other questions or anything else I can?
No, it was just interesting to read through and just go, wow, okay.
And I'm hoping for January that we'll have like a detailed report for you guys to show you like the breakdown of everything that we did, the types of calls for the total. The new dashboard they created for us allows us to create heat maps so we can show you guys where the most accidents occur and the most drug calls and stuff like that, so that we can start having some data-driven policing as we move forward.
Interesting. It'd be interesting to see the map of all the different districts, like you just explained. I was picturing them a little bit, but maybe at the end for the December monthly one, you maybe could include what those each zones are.
Sure. Yeah. Do you think you could also include like, you know, average time of day when those things happen, or like day of the week when those things happen, so you kind of see not just location but the winds of like this time, this place, this day of the week, steer clear kind of thing?
Our new dashboard has a lot of functionality to it where we can filter out and do stuff like that, so we can start looking at that stuff. I've already been looking at the crashes, and we probably know already where the most
Worthing
crashes are.
Parkway and 287.
That is the highest.
Number 1 calls, Prairie Star probably.
They
seem to have a lot of crazy.
I don't know if overall that they end up the highest. I think a lot of our areas where we do a lot of self initiated extra checks, like the Loves seems to be a popular place for our deputies to go hunting, so end up with a lot
We
of
knew
drug
that
traffic.
before it even opened, that would be a hot spot.
Yeah, and I'm assuming March when Buc-ee's opens that we'll see a reduction in some of that because some of that traffic will move from the Loves to the Buc-ee's, so we may see a reduction in some of the activity at Loves, but it won't go away totally, so.
So Buc-ee's is opening in March, right?
Yeah, I think that's what what I saw in the newspaper this week. So.
Yeah, they got a big hiring thing going on, I think.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Thank you. Trustee Ayers?
Port committee postponed their meeting till later in the month, so I'm not gonna have anything until the next meeting. I did have a kind of random question for Administrator Kirk. Is there any sort of PSA that goes out in the winter for proper techniques for snow shoveling, out of curiosity? I saw one of my, I may or may not have seen one of my neighbors shoveling snow into the road.
Yeah.
Which causes a lake to form in my driveway for 3 months.
We do annually put out information on Facebook and on our newsletter, like, please don't push your snow into the streets.
I've seen a lot of snow blowers too.
Put it in your yard, put it on, put it closer to your trees, whatever, but yeah, I don't know if we have this year. I think we actually have put a Facebook post out about snow shoveling, but I could be wrong.
That's where detached sidewalks are great.
But I'll double check with Stephanie, and yes, we want to encourage people not to push snow out on the street. It creates those ice dams. It can be a really big mess.
Okay, alright, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And that's all. Awesome.
Trustee Murphy?
I got a few things. I'm still participating in the energy cohort. We're doing a monthly meeting just to keep updated on what's going on around the state and with municipalities in the area. Wanted to bring two things up that are coming down from the state, it looks like. Right now, they're looking into a gas infrastructure pilot bill. They're kind of trying to look at alternatives to not installing gas infrastructure into neighborhoods. That's coming out of the governor's office. The other thing, in the land use bills coming down, it sounds like there's gonna be parking minimums in there. Something we've talked about in the past. I would assume they're dialing.
Parking minimums or parking maximums? Parking minimums.
Parking
Yeah.
minimums.
Reduced, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be one thing to bring up. We've got tree committee next Monday. Let's see, another thing I wanted to bring up, there was some interest at the tree committee last meeting about putting up a sign on the corner for the arboretum. I don't know if we're jumping the gun for that, but
I
this
think
may
we
be a coming soon.
I think we
sign of
probably
some sort.
are, only because the board hasn't really given us clear direction yet to build that. We have a concept we wanna bring to you. The plans are, they're like at a 10% phase, and so 10% of the design phase. So we intend to bring that to you in January for the board to kind of see and say, yes, we wanna continue forward with this plan as outlined. Might be a little early.
That's fine by me. And then the last thing, just wanted to hear where you guys were at on short-term rental.
Yeah, so we met internally last week, Ann and Ton and I. Ton started to build the backbone of a regulatory framework. She's also working on what she calls a story map for our website for people to be able to kind of follow the process and keep track of. It's actually really cool. Somehow it ties into GIS. I don't really understand how any of that stuff works, but thankfully Ton does. And so the real question that we have, and this is one of the things I was going to ask tonight. We think our next step is to bring to you a kind of a backbone regulation in the study session before we go out and do any kind of public outreach stuff. And based on that study session, we may choose to do additional public outreach, or you guys may feel comfortable with kind of what we have, and maybe have one more board meeting and adopt. I think there's some balance there, but we think our next step is a study session, sometime after the first of the year, with that kind of framework that she's preparing. And so unless you tell us otherwise, that's the way we're gonna handle it.
I do have a question to piggyback on that. Someone pointed out to me they had actually found the service agreement for their metro district. And I haven't gone and go looked at any of those service agreements yet, but they said there was a clause in there that said something about no short-term rentals.
That's probably true in some places. It's not an uncommon prohibition and covenants that get adopted in HOAs or metro districts. But those are not in the service plan, those are gonna be in their adopted covenants and restrictions, and so.
So that's something with us between.
That's
them
not
and
something
Metro
we would have
District.
approved.
Oh, okay, alright, so that's must have been what they were talking about, that's why I couldn't find anything.
I would assume that's the case. That would be a really uncommon provision in the service plan. I can't think of any that would have that.
Cool. Mayor Pro Tem.
Actually, I have a couple. Youth Advisory has their last meeting of the year tomorrow at the Rec Center. It's kind of going over what we did. I think we have Larimer County Services, like their youth engagement. They're gonna come by and talk to us for a little bit, so that's the thing. You guys are gonna be around.
What time?
7:30 to 8:30 tomorrow morning at the Rec Center.
Tomorrow morning?
Yeah, they do. It was at night, and then they realized that it starts overlapping with too many extracurriculars, so they're just doing it because everybody's got late start mornings for
You guys
schools.
are gonna get up, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Bill's bringing donuts.
I'm bringing breakfast burritos because it's the end of the year.
Order Rise and I'll bring them over.
I guess next couple questions other than the railroad ones. I know there's a business owner in town that's currently kind of frustrated with some code enforcement going on, with signage and essentially getting one piece of information from an inspector and a different piece of information from code enforcement. I'm not sure what the story is. I haven't heard both sides, but from what I'm hearing on one side of it, it seems lopsided. So I guess just kind of any information you can share with me or the board as to that, or it could be in an email if you'd like, but.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to address it now.
Yeah.
It is a little bit of a sordid tale. The long and short of it is that the sign that it was modified as part of the business opening is in conflict with our code. And our code is explicit that content, so you can have an existing non-conforming sign, a legal non-conforming sign, that is a sign that was already in existence when the code changed, and would not be in conformance with the current code, but until it's changed, it doesn't need to be brought to current standard. But the code is explicit that if you change the content, even the name of the business on the sign, that triggers that you lose your legal non-conforming status and the sign has to be brought up to the current code. Whether or not that's what, the best path forward, I think there's arguments on both sides.
Sure.
But that is what the code requires. And so when the business was going through the building improvement process, building permits don't cover sign. A building permit is not a sign permit. Those are two separate permit applications. Either the business didn't understand that or didn't ask. We didn't ask. This is an issue that's never come up before for us, so I don't know that we thought to address it proactively. Anyway, the sign changed. Our staff, in a different inspection process, said, hey, your sign changed, you have to get a sign permit to do that. And there was a lot of back and forth there. That was some positive, some not so positive. And the town has a sign grant program that will pay for 100% of the sign cost up to $2,500, which we informed the business owner of. We'd be happy to work with you on it. As long as we're working together, we don't need to worry about enforcement action or anything. We just need to kind of sort this out. And then the business owner said, basically told our staff, well, I've been intentionally ignoring your phone calls and I'm not going to deal with you anymore. And so there's I think a little more to the story than that. Sure. But the short answer is when the business name changed, the code says you lose that legal non-conforming status and you have to bring the sign up to current code. You have to submit a sign permit to do that. There's an associated fee, but if you apply for the sign grant program, then the only cost you have to get a new sign is the sign permit fee, which is $150. And then so long as we approve your sign design and it's consistent with our current code, then through the sign grant program, you can get that 100% paid for.
Okay.
That would be the easiest path forward.
Sure.
I'm not sure why we haven't been able to get there. I have not personally been involved in any of those conversations, if I'm being honest, so this is all, report back from my staff. I believe that business owner was cited and summoned to municipal court.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just curious on the other half of that story. Okay.
I think I got most of that right.
Then the usual train questions of railroad crossings and has CDOT remembered the turn signal on 287? Any of that?
No updates on 287 or the railroad crossing on Mountain, other than the ones I've given you previously. On Spartan Avenue, if you don't mind, I'll just touch on that. I was gonna bring that up tonight too. We're working with the same legal firm that Ken Feldman is from. They have somebody in their office that specializes in dealing with the railroad. And we've learned a lot just in the short time we've been working with them. It's been really, really valuable. He was recommended by Attorney Smith. So he's gonna help us through the PUC process, application process, and in dealing with our crossing and maintenance agreement with BNSF. There was a lot of stuff in the BNSF agreement that seemed reasonable to us as staff, and he said, no, there's, some of this stuff's already been dealt with even recently in the court, and they can't require this of you, and we're gonna push back and say, here's all the reasons why we're not gonna do that. But even in that context, I think we're actually getting really close to that being, all that process being done. He felt like the PUC process was gonna go pretty smoothly based on the fact that we already have a draft operation or crossing and maintenance agreement with BNSF, so long as we can agree to terms there. He said that's really the big hurdle. And if you have that and you have 100% design plans already approved by BNSF, which we do, then the PUC process should actually be pretty simple. So we started that application this week, and there's a possibility that we could be under construction on the Spartan Avenue crossing this year. Assuming those processes all go smoothly, we get good bids that we can afford, and the board says, yes, let's do that. But,
Sure.
we made some pretty good strides.
I'm just impressed we're seeing change from a railroad company within the span of a human lifespan.
Yeah, it's interesting, and he talked to us a little bit about just kind of the changing nature of the railroad really in the last year, and some of the decisions that are being made at the state level and other things that are kind of forcing them to be a little easier to work with.
I don't trust the word coming out of those guys.
I don't know that I've seen any of that personally, but I'm hopeful
Sat
that
next
he
to a guy
has.
for 2 days, and they said they're actively trying to close more stops for the train. So I'm glad we have an agreement we can point at, right? Yeah, good.
One other thing was winter, the lighting contest, sorry.
The neighborhood lighting one?
Yeah,
Holiday lighting
met Trustee
contest?
Kurtz, saw Mary, I was handing out candy canes, it was great, saw your speech.
Good. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yeah,
Apparently the mic is okay. Good.
It was questionable, but you know, candy canes, but, you know, can't control it.
When you don't bring a flashlight, it's nighttime. I just kept that thing in my pocket, and I was like, just go from whatever your heart will.
Yep.
It's quick.
That's all I had.
Awesome. Cool. So mine was about rail. That's really good because this feeds off to Chris. I was really worried next to I was at a 2-day retreat at the Wexford in Denver for rail, and they said they are actively searching for more crossings to make this rail time that they're promising. So we're kind of grandfathered in. There's no way they can push back on that.
No, I mean, until we have an agreement signed, I guess technically the BNSF could change their mind. But one of the things that I learned, you know, I've been told, even actually in like some CML, sessions I went to on railroad crossings and all that, I always walked away with the opinion that the railroad had a pretty strong ability to say, you're gonna close crossings in order to get the new one. And I've been, we've always operated on the assumption that it had to be 2 for 1, and that's where they started. You know, if you may recall, that was probably almost 2 years ago. What he said is that they actually have no ability to require you to close anything. They can make your life really difficult through that to get a new crossing through the PUC process if you can't agree to that, but that's not like a legal requirement to close crossings. And so the fact that we've already agreed to close one to get the other one, so there's no net change for them. And this is an enhanced crossing with signal arms and medians and there's a lot of safety improvements that get built as part of this crossing. I think we're in a good spot.
Good, awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, just going off that retreat we had, it was good to hear. I mean, we are for this passenger rail. Things are coming month after month after month, and even by the time we have to make or break to put this on the ballot, the service development plan is not going to be done yet. The final agreements with the railroads aren't going to be done yet. We're not going to have a full analysis of all the taxations. So it's just uphill no matter what. It was, yeah, it didn't really end that well. I think really in Berthoud, we're really pushing back on what was happening as far as being taxed, Greeley's side being taxed without seeing anything, and us being taxed plus having a rail going through and not stop. So that played into yesterday's meeting. I think there's just a lot of stuff. I was honest at the MPO, I'll be honest here tonight. There's a lot of people talking behind the scenes as directors that aren't voting the same way. So I think there's a lot of confusion, mistrust. This isn't gonna pass, but then when it comes to votes, they're all for getting it on the ballot. Just from my stance, I'd rather not put it on the ballot, just cause I am kind of a rail fan and rather work this out than put it on the ballot and it fail, or put it on the ballot and it passes and Berthoud's really in a spot. So CDOT actually, a guy named John Putnam wants to come down and look over Berthoud and what they can do to kind of make it right with us. I just said either take us out of the taxation district or give us a stop, but I did throw in there too, maybe some grade separated crossings, and he's like, oh, maybe that's something. I mean, the reality of that is what, 12 million each, so.
That's probably a whole lot more than that.
Okay, so let's say 15 million each plus 4 stops, they're gonna give us $75 million. Might as well just give us a train stop, you know, but anyway, he's like, oh, that's a good idea, yeah, let's talk about it. Anyway, so he might be coming down.
One thing that, on the rail conversation, we got to notice that there is a new federal grant opportunity. I can't remember the acronym, but it's all for transportation related projects. You may have actually sent it to us from the MPO, Mayor Karspek, or maybe it came through one of those channels. But in any case, I asked Brian, my assistant, to go through that notice funding availability to see if a planning grant for our entire rail corridor, including a stop, could be paid for with that, which would be, I think, which might help give us some leverage to.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
So we just had that conversation today, but I mean, I think that would be a great grant application if there was a planning grant available where we could hire a firm, somebody like FHU or a transportation planning firm, to kind of evaluate, to engage with front range passenger rail. What do stop requirements look like? Where could we accommodate that in town? How would we do that? How would that change, transportation patterns around? Could we do transit-oriented development in those areas, and how might we look at that in the future? But really look at the rail corridor, whether or not we get a stop today, knowing that we'd want a stop someday. Where would it be? How could it fit into the town? How would that change planning around there? How would that change our current transit, especially if we end up with microtransit, and how would we route people to be able to access that? Anyway, just going through and creating kind of that.
Totally, that's
Real
awesome.
stop
I didn't know
master
about any of
plan,
that, so that's
so-
awesome. I didn't know about that grant, so that must be like a Inflation Reduction Act stuff.
I think it is. I think it's a new grant program. It's an acronym, and it's an acronym I didn't recognize. So it's
That's awesome.
yeah. Anyway, so we're gonna look and see if that would be
Yeah,
an opportunity, and if not, we may want to consider doing that anyway.
I was gonna
with our
say,
own
this
funds.
is just
I
this
think-
trustee's point of view, but the more we can get out ahead of the vote, the more we can say we were looking into this.
Yeah.
I think we should get, this isn't my idea, this is trustee previous trustee Hyman's idea, that we get the lead school of business involved. And Chris, this was your idea, an economic impact analysis.
Mhm.
I think we could put them through that, say this is what we're potentially losing. Compliments to trustee Kurtz here that brought up something, we have some local powers that I didn't know we have, that we could force them to come to the table and talk about it, talk to us. And I think we should look at all that as soon as the next year starts versus wait until it's about hitting the ballot and their minds are already made up. But I think advocacy is working. I think there's people changing their minds that, this is more of an issue than we thought about not including local communities. So I think, yeah, it's good. From
We
being
don't want
terrible, let's
the
be
we don't want,
sincere.
we don't want the interstate to pass us by, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the
Right.
That's what you and I have talked about, and we've
75
talked
mile
about
per
as a
hour,
board
yeah.
previously, and
It's frustrating to see their callousness on some of this, and just kind of looking the other way. And I know they're good people, but they're really not giving any good answers. Cause there aren't really any. Cool, so that covers that. Tomorrow night, we're celebrating 5 years of the new Larimer County Behavioral Health, tax. Funded the new facility, funded local grants. Berthoud has yet to receive a grant, but we have no mental health facilities in town, so it's hard for us to even apply for them until we get the life center going through. And they might be having some issues with fundraising, the House Neighborly Service, so it sounds like the overall House Neighborly Service out of Loveland might be leading a capital campaign instead of just the Berthoud section to try and help us out get that life center, but as we've talked about tonight, the cost of building just keeps increasing and it's hard for them to figure out where we're getting all this money, so. Other than that, I don't have any other updates, but thank you everyone on this board, our clerks, wonderful clerks, Sergeant Williamson and all the Lambert County Sheriff's Office. This might be my last year and it has just been the honor of my life to be able to work with y'all. I get emotional, but especially this board.
Yeah.
So thank you all and I hope you all have a great Christmas and time with your family. Attorney Smith, anything?
Oh, I wanna wish you all happy holidays and a safe holiday, and really to say thank you for approving my fee increase for next year. I really appreciate that, so thank you very, very much.
It's great to have you.
That's all.
Anything else like to add? Okay, great. I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys. As an aside, the Chamber Gala is coming up on January 12th.
Brianna?
The town has a table as part of our
Oh, the
normal
gala,
chamber
okay.
sponsorship. It's their big annual gala.
Yeah.
Walt's gonna send you an email. I just wanted to give you a heads up, so that if you're interested in attending, please let us know. If we end up with more than a table worth, we can get another table, I think. And if we can't, we'll just make adjustments, to make sure. that we
Black tie event.
That's just,
it's out at TPC. It's a really nice event they put on.